ancient Rome, that magnificent empire, gladiators, the Colosseum, the legal system. These are the things that come to all our minds, aren't they? But what if I told you about a mysterious civilization that laid Rome's foundations long before it grew so large, yet was itself lost in the dusty pages of history? A civilization whose language is still not fully deciphered, whose origins are a complete mystery. A people where women were equal to men in society, fond of music, dance, and life, but also shaped by a belief in fate and the afterlife. Today, we will discover that ancient people who rose from the shadows in the heart of Italy and inspired Rome, the Etruscans. It all began in what is now Italy's famous Tuscany region. This was the ancient land of the Etruscans, their cradle of civilization. They called themselves Racina, while the Romans called them Etrusci or Tusci. The Greeks gave them the name Tyrrhen. This name still gives its name to the sea west of Italy today, the Tyrrhenian Sea. They were not a single kingdom. They were a confederation of 12 independent city-states called the Dodecapolis. At their head was a noble leader, or king, called a Lucumo. These cities were not just political centers, but also the heart of an urban culture far ahead of their time. With their paved roads, sewage systems, and arched structures that revolutionized architecture, they built the first great civilization in Italy. Some of these cities still exist. Pisa, Bologna, Parma. Modern cities built on Etruscan foundations. Even Rome itself, according to myth, was founded with the sacred rituals of the Etruscans, with a sacred boundary drawn by a plow. The fact that Rome's last kings were of Etruscan origin is just one of the surface traces of this deep relationship. But the real story lies much deeper beneath the surface. Rome's first great sewage system, the Cloaca Maxima, was a marvel of Etruscan engineering. The foundation stones of the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill were laid by the hands of Etruscan stonemasons. The fasces symbol, used by the Romans in their triumphal processions, was a sign of authority for Etruscan leaders. In fact, Rome's famous triumphal procession ceremonies were a direct legacy of the victory celebrations of Etruscan kings. So, who were these people? Where did they come from? This is where history falls silent. Even ancient historians were divided on this issue. Herodotus says that the Etruscans migrated from Anatolia, from Lydia. He tells that after a great famine, a prince named Tyrrhenos put his people on ships and brought them to Italy. However, other historians, like Dionysius of Halicarnassus, object to this story. He says, the language, religion, and life of these people do not resemble those of the Lydians. They are native to Italy. So what does modern science say? A comprehensive archaeogenetic analysis published in 2021 revealed a surprising result. The DNA structure of the Etruscans was almost identical to that of their neighbors, the Latins. This suggests they were most likely an indigenous people of Italy. Archaeology also supports this view. The Villanovan culture, this indigenous culture, dating back to the 10th century BC, is considered the direct ancestor of the Etruscans. Their tombs, pottery, ceremonies, everything reflects the early forms of the Etruscan world. At this point, classifying the Etruscans as migrants or natives is insufficient. They were the product of a dynamic synthesis, shaped both internally and externally. They were indigenous, but they created a unique civilization by blending the Eastern Mediterranean influences that came with sea trade with their own unique cultural fabric. But their greatest secret was their language. Etruscan, a language still not fully deciphered. They adapted their alphabet from Greek letters, but their language was completely different. Short texts written from right to left, tombstones, votive inscriptions, The longest text was found among the wrappings of a mummy in Egypt, the Liber Linteus, a prayer index remaining from a linen book. Another source of hope is the Pergi gold tablets. This sacred text, written in both Phoenician and Etruscan, offers us invaluable clues, but it is not enough to fully reveal the secrets of the language. Their language may be lost, but the stones speak, and the Etruscan stones tell magnificent things. They were a wealthy civilization. With the fortune they obtained from iron and copper mines, they became one of the powerful actors in Mediterranean trade. Bucero ceramics, those dark black metallic-looking unique vessels, were in demand even in Greek markets. And in goldwork, they possessed the most advanced techniques of their age. This wealth was also reflected in their social life. The murals in their tombs present a vivid portrait of a society that enjoyed life and was fond of entertainment. Banquets, music, and dance were an indispensable part of their lives. And in the leading role of these banquets was a figure rarely seen in most ancient societies: the woman. The Etruscan woman was an active figure not only at home, but in all areas of society. The tombstones bearing her name document that she was seen as an individual, basing her identity not on marriage, but on her lineage. Some inscriptions even show that the mother's surname was passed on to the children. This is almost unique in the patriarchal ancient world. Moreover, in many Etruscan tombs, women are depicted playing the lyre, serving wine, and even playing games. This shows that they were an indispensable part not only of the home, but also of public and ceremonial spaces. Women of the aristocratic class could even have political influence. The Etruscan woman named Tanaquil ensured the upbringing of Rome's sixth king, Servius Tullius, and played an active role behind the scenes in royal politics. While women in Greece and Rome were almost completely excluded from public life, Etruscan women participated in social life, could read and write, own property, and most importantly, reclined on the same couches as men at banquets. Although this was seen as immorality by their neighbors, it was in fact proof of the high value placed on women in Etruscan society. Etruscan religion was also unique. Tinia, the lord of the skies, Uni, the mother goddess, and Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. This trio would later inspire the Capitoline Triad in Rome. But the most important feature that distinguished Etruscan religion from others was the importance they gave to divination. According to legend, this knowledge was taught to them by Tages, a wise being in a child's body who emerged from the earth. Specially trained priests called haruspices made prophecies by looking at the internal organs of sacrificed animals, especially the liver. This was considered a message from the gods. No important decision was made without consulting these signs. For them, death was not an end, but a transition. They designed their tombs like comfortable homes for their lives to continue in the afterlife. They filled them with everyday objects, jewelry, and food. The ritual combats held at funeral ceremonies would become the inspiration for Rome's bloody gladiator shows. And we come to the irony of history. The Etruscans were destroyed by a power they had nurtured with their own hands, Rome. The first kings of Rome were Etruscan. They built the city's infrastructure and taught its state symbols. Rome was, in a sense, a student of the Etruscans, but the student surpassed the master. In 509 BC, the Romans overthrew the last Etruscan king and established their own republic. The greatest weakness of the Etruscans was their inability to achieve political unity. Faced with the rising power of Rome and the Celtic invasions from the north, they continued to fight among themselves instead of uniting. Rome skillfully exploited this division and conquered the Etruscan cities one by one. By the 1st century BC, the Etruscan civilization had completely ended politically. Their language, culture, and identity dissolved in the massive melting pot of Rome. But the disappearance of a people is not just about losing land. When Hannibal came to Italy to destroy Rome, he hoped the Etruscans would join him. But he was mistaken. By then, the Etruscans saw themselves as Romans. Even Roman emperors like Emperor Claudius were proud of their Etruscan origins and wrote their history. The Etruscans were destroyed by wars, but their real disappearance occurred at the identity level. They were assimilated within Rome, their names even erased over time. Today, their language is not spoken, but the inscriptions are still on the stones. Their gods are forgotten, but the myths live on in other forms, and they are no more. But in the DNA of Tuscany, there is a legacy flowing through the veins of modern people, the Etruscans. Sometimes the true heroes of history are the quietest ones, and the Etruscans, that lost light in the shadow of Rome. Perhaps they deserve not just to be forgotten, but to be remembered.